Hello, y'all. Hey, welcome to the first ever We and Me live stream. I'm Chad, and this is Mr. Will Wise. And we're guinea pigs today because while we do lots and lots of stuff live for over Zoom, we don't live stream. And so our style is very much designed for contribution, not just consumption. And so throughout, feel free to drop a question into the chat. It'll be a little bit delayed, but our aim is to get them to you. I'm going to share my intention for our time here right now, and then Will, I'll invite you to say hey and share your intention. My intent for this time is to meaningfully connect with you, Will, in a way that is fun and useful and meaningful for anybody else who's watching live or checking out the recording.
Beautiful. I'll sign on to that. My intention, so I'm Will, and my intention is to playfully explore our current thinking of connection so that something new can arise, something deeper, some wisdom.
And I'll sign on to that. So here's the format of what we've got. Will and I came with 2 questions for each other, and I'm assuming because we invited only a handful of people to show up today, that you might be somewhat familiar with We and Me and our tools and the connection toolkit and stuff. So we're not going to talk a lot about that. We're just going to dive straight in. But the format is we've created some questions, a couple questions for each other. And at any point in time that you drop a question into the chat, we will happily travel down that rabbit hole and hopefully to give you some answers to that question. Not the answer, because the best way to kill a question is with one answer. I think that really great questions tend to have lots. And so, Will, if you want to, and one more little installation, because we're playing with live stream as a new format and considering do we do this monthly and create conversations that matter. And so one thing that we're playing with too is because this is unscripted and Will and I are just having a chat, it's possible that some new ideas will arise. And if and when they do, either for Will or for me, we're going to pop into this little zone here as a way to jump in and say, ooh, new thought, and sharing it out loud for the very first time. Cool. Okay, that's a scoop. Will, you wrote a book called Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. And I am anticipating what you got to ask me.
What is connection currently teaching you?
I think maybe one of our favorite questions in the We Connect deck is this one. I appreciate the spin on it, though, and actually like the idea. Or right, okay, not to be slightly cheeky, but in this exact moment, connection is teaching me that you can add any sort of object to that question. So this question, what is life teaching you right now? I never really considered just saying instead of life, just replace that with any other noun, and it turns that thing, object, or person into a lesson. So that's kind of cool. Connection, though, is teaching me right now that without a clear intention, I am likely to connect in a way that's almost no better than twiddling my thumbs. Meaning, like when and I won't give specifics to this, but I was recently hanging out with a group of people, and I went in intentionless and even a little bit exhausted, to be honest. And at some point in the weekend that we were hanging out together, it almost felt like I was waiting for connection to be over, as opposed to being amazed that I had human beings sitting in front of me able to connect. And so, I guess without a clear intent, I leave the present and jump into like some anticipating future moving forward.
And that future is vague and nebulous. Is that what you're saying?
vague and nebulous, or not necessarily. It was like in that particular case, we were traveling, and I was thinking about like getting home, and so just being home and being there. So it wasn't necessarily like what am I heading toward. It was just almost anticipating being done with this.
Got it.
Cool. I'm gonna sub out my question for Norma's question for you, Will, to start. Let's see if this actually works. Hi, Norma. It's really nice to see you. So how has the pandemic helped or changed your mission, vision, or goals? Will.
Wow. So, Norma, one of the things that I've been noticing recently with some programming is how quickly people are moved to tears. And I don't think it's necessarily anything that I am doing, although I may be contributing to it. But I think there is a way that people are starved for connection, and that the toxic stress that we're all swimming in, that has become kind of a norm, that it's difficult to set aside. When you do set it aside, there's some magic that can happen. And so one of the participants chose a photo with a dog on it. And I'm sitting here trying to grab and see if I got that photo handy. And let's just say this is the dog. This is a. Whoa,
there you go. Here's the dog.
There you go. So she chose this dog image to represent who she was and her connection to work. And she was saying a little bit more about it and such. And another one of the participants was like, oh, that's so perfect. That's so who you are. And goes on to say about her connection with dog and how that fit for her. And the woman who chose the dog said, wait, no, that's not it. I'm not a dog. And was totally denying anything that she was actually hearing from this woman who was speaking from the heart. And I let her continue for a little bit, but then I said, pause. This woman here is trying to say something I don't think you quite got. So what you said was valid, and can you be open to what this woman has to share? And so the woman then again shares about how this woman is really loyal, how she shows up, thinking about the customer rather than her own particular needs, how she shows up with enthusiasm, right? All these really beautiful things. And suddenly the tears were creeping up on the woman who chose the dog, and tears were showing up on the woman who was expressing how she was like a dog. And what I got from all of that, and the tears that showed up multiple times in that engagement and in a following engagement, was that people are so starved for connection that they're not actually able to step into it without some help. When we are stressed, we become very focused. And when we can let go of that stress, we can have more of a wide view. And it was only with me pausing and setting aside whatever the task was for a minute and just say, hey, can we listen to each other? That listening allowed people to be recreated in this new world that we're stepping into. And with the dog woman, with the tears, also was seen for the first time in a year and a half. That, I think, is the magic. And so how has things changed? How do we get people really to see and hear each other for perhaps the first time, either in a in-person programming or in the digital world?
think I'm having a little bit of an aha just hearing you share that and reading one of the comments in the chat about, so on the flip side of this dog, Will, the quote is, nothing shapes our lives so much as the questions we ask, refuse to ask, or never dream of asking. And somebody told me that usually when there's a never or an always or an every time or a never, I think I already said never, it's usually not true, right? And so I'm even though I love this question, I think that you could probably sub out nothing for questions are one really important thing that shapes the way that we connect and shapes our world. But what you just pointed to is that listening matters just as much, if not even more, right? And I became aware, we were facilitating a program together like 4 years ago, Will, I think. And somebody else chose a different card. This image, chose a card with bricks on it. And it became this sentence became apparent to me when she was sharing. And it is the idea that the way that we listen absolutely has the power to change what people say. And so you can ask the coolest question on the planet, you can be the best question asker, but if you haven't really seen and witnessed somebody like you shared, it's really hard to get the full potential out of that question, right? It's almost like cheating a question to ask it and then not give 100% of your presence and attention right in that moment. Okay, for a little energy mix-up, and just because I'm appreciating playing with toys, Maisha's new to the channel, and her question was, first of all, hi Maisha, welcome to the channel. I'm super glad you're here. I do not carry, so the potato that she's referring to is, I have a picture of my son Otto, who when he is, I took the picture 3 seconds after I held up a plastic potato to his face, and his face just lit up and is got a smile from ear to ear. So excited about this plastic potato, which most people would be like, a bit disappointed about. So to answer your question in short, I do not actually, that's not true. I did bring the potato to Wichita, Kansas to lead a session for 100 faculty 2 weeks ago. And everybody was like, oh my goodness, can I touch the potato? I've seen it in a video. It was kind of fun. But it's a fairly new story. I've been sharing that story for years and years because my son is not quite 2 yet. And so I suspect that I will have to get more plastic potatoes to bring them around. For a little bit of levity. Will, can I throw my question at you?
Sure.
So the headline of our live stream right now is the number one or the most powerful ingredient for creating connection. And for us, that is intention. Because without it, the bottom kind of falls out. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do, who you're trying to be. If you haven't gotten really clear about your intention and the way that it affects somebody else, it's really, really hard to make that connection meaningful and stick. So I'm wondering for you, and you don't need to unpack details of it, but you've been, for those watching that know or have followed our relationship for any time, right? We co-created We and Me, but my face has been a little bit louder and more forward lately. And you have gone through this health odyssey, and I'll leave it at that. And I'm wondering how that odyssey has shifted the way you see intention, or shifted the way that you hold that word, intention.
What occurs to me is, some of you might be familiar with our new journal, Ask Powerful Questions, a mindfulness journey to skip the small talk and create conversations that matter. And when writing this, there was a process that I was going through that was mirroring working live programs and having people create clear intentions for their work and be more effective. And in the beginning of it, there is this quote, "You are what your deepest desire is. And is your desire, so is your intention. And as your intention, so is your will. And so as is your will, so is your deed. And as is your deed, so is your destiny." And it's kind of a pathway to creating your destiny, right? To the future that you want to step into. And what I realized in writing this, that the only way that I can really access into that path is with reliability, is the ability to create a clear intention. And so on this health odyssey that I'm on, there has been so many times in which I've needed to ask for things in which, in the moment of asking, were impossible. They weren't done before. We've never done it like that. That kind of language. And by creating a clear intent for myself, it allowed me to walk into those, let's call them stressful situations with medical teams, and to be able to clearly ask for what I need or what we're co-creating together. And sometimes I spoke that intention out loud, and sometimes I just kept it to myself. The other thing that's occurring to me is it's showing up in all different flavors of my life. So not just on the health odyssey, but the salesman who's coming to my door to sell me something, or the technician that's coming to my house to install something, and saying, well, my intent is, and be really clear about that, has been helpful. And in the medical world, I've been able to create things that were never done before. And one time I was calling the medical team, and my wife said, "You know, Will, it's only because they love you so much that they're willing to even entertain this idea." And I smiled at that. And I thought, okay, where does that love come from? It comes from connection. Well, where did that come from? Creating the clear intent. And oftentimes that intent is about uplifting the caregiver as much as the caretaker. So creating a dynamic where we're all most alive. Yeah.
Lovely. You know that I'm in our relationship, I tend to be Mr. Practical Tactical. And so thinking about that there were loads of pick-upable nuggets to create connection. But the comment that I'm going to put up here, I'm curious. It's a little bit delayed, so this comment was probably referring to something else. But I would love for you to blend what you just said about intention. What is, so for somebody who's relearning connection, and sometimes it's just like shaking off some dust, especially as workplaces might be coming back together at varying capacities around the world. What's the tip or tool or idea with intention to reconnect better as we meld into the world? Whatever world that is, right? There's like constantly oscillating.
I've been finding that speaking the intent for connection in the beginning lands for people in different ways. And so what I've been finding is I've been needing to say my intent in 3 different or 4 different ways, where before I might have only needed to say it once or maybe a slightly different way. But I think connection is so new for people in this current dynamic that they don't hear it. And so you just got to find another way to say it. And so recently I said something like, my intent is for us to reconnect and enjoy being together in such a way that we're all uplifted by the experience. And what I realized about halfway through that day is that when I said reconnect, they were like, oh, let's just keep it fun and light. So what ended up happening is I must have had a sense of that early on, because as I was explaining the intent, I just kind of looked at them all and I said, and you can't go too deep with me. And their eyes just got really big and they kind of leaned back. And I just took that and I said, and for some of you, now that I just said that, you're trying to find a way to creep away from this conversation. And we all had a good laugh. So trying to find multiple different ways in order for people to understand what my intention is with connection. Because in some ways, I do think it's a foreign language or a foreign word. Yeah.
To riff off that or build on that, Renee's question, hi Renee, is how do you see respect as a part of the intention? And I think what's coming out for me in that is, so your idea there that you just shared is get clear about your intent and share it in 3 different ways, which I love because there's this concept that there actually is no universal language, right? We both happen to be speaking English, but that means different things for each of us because we have different context around those words. Different people taught us English. We learned in a different world. And so by saying it 3 different ways increases the chance that it's actually communicated. And I think in relation to how is respect a part of intention, I think that it can actually be disrespectful to people's time to move forward in any gathering when the intention is not clear, right? It's one thing if the intention, if folks don't get on board with your intention, right, or if people don't agree with your intention, that's a different conversation. But if you are just pushing forward and people don't actually even know why, it's just not necessarily respectful of their time in that context. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think that at the root of intention, or the root word of intention, is to stretch. A rubber band lying around here somewhere, right? To stretch over the needs of the whole and pull people together. And so intentions are not me saying, hey, Will, I want to get this done for me today. It's actually saying, hey, Will, I would love for us to get this done so that we can save 5-10 minutes of our day, right? When that intention stretches over the needs of somebody else, it almost pushes you to be and operate in an other-centric mindset. To say, to tap into what does this person and this group actually need right now, as opposed to a lot of times as leaders or as leader, right? I can get a little bit myopically focused on me, right? What are people thinking of me? How do I appear? Will they like this? Will they like me, right? And all of that me needs to get flipped to we in order to create a really good intention. And so I remember, one of the most stark moments for me of this, it's crazy. It's now like 6 or 7 years ago, I was invited to give my first TEDx talk. And the 60 seconds before walking on stage, I was really nervous, perhaps the most nervous that I've ever chose to be from a heart rate perspective, right? Heart rate was really going. If you watch the video, though, 30 seconds in, there's some nerves that just wash away. And I think for me, there was this shift from I was really focused about around myself in the beginning. And at some point, quickly enough, I realized that this actually has nothing to do with me. It's not about me. There's 800 people sitting in front of me. I've got a few minutes with them, and so what I say may be able to plant some seeds that grow into trees that make a forest of connection happen. And so I want to do more of that. I want to be really intentional about that. There you go. There you go, Renee. Thanks for asking.
I love how you took respect and turned it into we. I was thinking about the journal and how one of the questions along the way is, how does your intent include we? And somehow respect shows up when you're considering the needs of the other. When you turn that nervousness that Chad was feeling into service, nervous to service. The need for respect just is baked in. It just is part of the dynamic. So I hope that answers what you were asking for.
I think so. Maisha, this is such a lovely, lovely comment, and I'm grateful that A, you're new, and B, you took the time to share it. Pop it up one more time because it's meaningful enough. So the Surgeon General, right, has put out there that the lack of connection or social isolation is, I don't know that he used the word pandemic or epidemic, although I'm feeling like the article that he wrote was titled "The Epidemic of Loneliness" or "The Loneliness Epidemic." It absolutely was. And so maybe not pandemic because cultures treat connection differently. But I think what you said is absolutely true. And when we the pandemic magnified something that already existed. But what I loved especially was the introvert dynamic. So somebody who is extroverted has a much higher tolerance for intentionless connection, which I would probably categorize as small talk, right? So someone who's really extroverted, like there are some people on the planet who are happy to just like chit chat aimlessly for a long period of time with no clear intention. Typically, introverts don't fall into that bucket. Those are people who, introverts are people who tend to recharge and gain energy from being alone, is how the definition, like Myers-Briggsy definition, is laid out. But I wonder if that definition misses something, which is introverts tend to recharge by being alone or having really intentional connection and communication. Right? I think when that intention is clear, the purpose is clear, we know why, there's a level of authenticity that's achieved that just won't ever be as long as you're aimlessly chatting. Now, I'm somebody who I walk around my neighborhood and neighbors are standing outside and I can, quote, aimlessly chat. It's not that I'm going over to my neighbor's house and saying, hey, I'm just walking my dog, but my intention right now is to meaningfully connect with you and build our relationship deeper, right? It's not that intentions have to be intense. I think that intentions just have to be clear, right? Somebody, I don't know if it was Brene Brown or somebody on the planet, said to be unclear is to be unkind. And I think that relates in some ways to intention. Well, I want to let you react to that. And there's a couple chats that I'm going to tune into and pop one up.
A bit of clarity, perhaps. As an introvert, if I go to a party with my wife who has been an extrovert off the chart, although that's changing, but let's just say she's an extrovert and I'm an introvert, and we go to a party, she's standing up and she's like hummingbird, and she'll connect with almost everybody at the party. I'll sit down on a couch, create a space, and somebody will show up, we'll sit down and we'll chat. And it won't be long into that where I will ask something, hey, do you want to go deeper? Or what's that really mean for you? And there's a way that even without the power of intention and the deep thinking I've done about it in recent years, I can go back in my memory and remember connecting with people deeply at a party. But there was a way that I was steering or driving the conversation to a deeper level. and a level in which we were really seen. And it doesn't have to be intense, and it doesn't have to be deep, although I do tend to like those. But it does have to be where the other person is really seen and even celebrated for their failures, their authenticity. Yeah.
The being seen element, I'm aware right now the irony of, we're playing with this new format of live stream, which is kind of not new because we're constantly live with groups in person or remotely. But YouTube this year launched a big trends report, culture and trends report of saying this is what we're noticing on YouTube. This is where people are being drawn to. And they used the two words immediacy and simultaneity, meaning right now and together in the same moment, right? So if you're watching a live stream, there's something cool knowing that, like, I'm actually sitting right here, right now in this exact moment, and Will is sitting there right now in this exact moment as you're watching, right? Like, zoom out on Earth a little bit, and even though there's only a handful of us, because this is just a little test live stream, that's pretty cool, right? That exists. And I think, and so I'm saying that to upgrade or update the intention of this live stream right now, which is, I hope that if you've stuck around or if you're watching the replay, that you feel a little bit like you're hanging out with me and Will over tea in our living room. Well, not our they're in two different separate geographic locations, but hanging out with us in our digital living room. And because that's the case, I would invite you, if you're watching, feel free to ask something that you might consider asking if we were sitting down in a living room. I know there's like a live stream, it's public, whatever, but feel free to tap into what are you naturally, genuinely curious about, and feel free to fire off a question around it. I'm going to share this one comment from, I'll let you try our lovely name, Will. Maui Mir? Maui.
Yeah, beautiful.
So,
one more time.
Yeah. The idea of going off being respectful of others' time. Some data acknowledged that people were excited about the added intention with communication, meaning I couldn't just pop into somebody's office and steal 15 minutes of their time. I actually had to send an invite, schedule something. There was deliberate. So even though this cultural narrative for some organizations showed up that were like, oh, we're like constantly on Zoom, we just go back to back to back from Microsoft Team meetings or whatever. Even though that was the narrative, those had to be scheduled. Now, if they started to get recurring, then maybe we fell back into our old patterns of intentionless or lack of clearness types of communication. That's one aha showing up for me there. I'm mindful of time, Will. We don't want to go forever here. Probably want to wrap it up in the next 5 or 6 minutes or so. And so a question to you as people ponder what question they might want to ask. Is there anything else that you really wanted to dive into, unpack, chat about?
One of the things that has occurred to me recently is that maybe, so tell me what you think about this idea, maybe that connection is compassion in action.
Ooh.
Compassion in action. And what I'm meaning by that is once the connection has been formed, there's a way that you lean forward and you're with that person in such a way that you want to contribute to their well-being with some kind of action. What do you think about that?
I think that my analytical brain immediately said, what is the definition of compassion? And so it's interesting, considering our definitions of empathy and sympathy. The compassion is defined as sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others, which is not really what my connotations were about that word. But it's interesting. So I think Merriam and Webster if I was talking with Merriam and Webster, then I would say I need to think more about compassion, or connection as compassion in action. I think talk about like stepping into somebody's shoes as empathy, and then we have kind of altered that and said I think actually really good empathy is stepping one of your feet into somebody else's shoes and keeping one foot rooted and grounded in your own reality. I think that taking the connection as compassion in action, I wonder if it's actually like taking steps in their shoes, so actually walking with them as opposed to the compassionate like. I even picture like Compassion International commercials, right, where we're like giving out something. There's almost a hierarchy connected to that, and I think in true connection, it's totally equal, right? Your fears, dreams, aspirations, failures, etc., are all just as important as mine. Not more important, not less important, just as important. We are equal. It does not matter what our titles are or where we came from. Yeah, that's my off-the-cuff riff anyway, or off-the-cuff thought. We'll need to pink sheet it, which is some language that Will and I have for deliberately think about something and map it out. Renee's got a slightly different definition of compassion, which is fun. Some questions rolled through, and so let's turn our last few minutes into just lightning round. We're going to try to hit every single question as we go. And I'm a time optimist, so I said 5 minutes, and it was like, yeah, it's probably not likely. So, Will, how do you celebrate failures?
Norma, I believe that failures is an opportunity to learn. And as long as you are continuing to learn, there's no such thing as failure. Failure for me is when I do the same thing again and again and again, and I didn't learn anything about it. So fail fast, learn fast, and then move it on. I guess the other thing as a facilitator and as a teacher of connectors, I think one of the things I encourage is when you fail in front of a group, rather than pretend and hide and pretend it didn't happen, is to acknowledge it and to name it. In the book, I tell a story about a time in which a student said something really profound, and the next person had started talking, and I paused for a moment and I said, wait a minute, student, I want you to make sure, I didn't say this, what my intent was, I wanted to make sure they knew that I got it. And so what I said to them was, you've had a really hard life, and it's been a real challenge. And I was hoping he just knew that I got it. So I asked the next person to speak, and off we went. He never shared any more during the meeting. And the next day, when after I had shared that I got it, my heart tensed up, my palms started sweating a little bit, and I was getting a message that I had done something wrong, and I didn't do anything with it. I just ignored it. The next day when he came and asked me a question about intention, we were talking about it. I answered his question, and he starts walking away. And I said, wait, what? Yesterday, when that moment in which I reflected back, what was going on for you there? And he says, oh, yeah, I got it. You were just telling me I was speaking too much. Oh, that was not what was going on at all. What was going on, and I tried to explain it. So to name your failure in front of a group has been most useful for me. I was not lightning round, but we're...
No, I absolutely love it. And I think it touches on this idea that, the common phrase is saying that the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think it relates a little bit to Malmir's question, which is, with intention, are there other ways to say it? rather than becoming the old broken record of my intention is, my intention is, my intention is. I'll leave that one to you, and then I'll add to it if I've got something meaningful to say.
We are gathered here today. Our reason for coming here, the value that we want to get from this experience, is other ways to say it. The reason why I tend to use the word intent, because it means to stretch, and it pulls in the needs of the other. I tend not to use purpose, because purpose is outside of us, and intent comes from within us.
Ooh. At the risk of jumping in too early, little aha here in that in the book, Ask Powerful Questions, we spell out 3 different types of intentions. Right, so you can have future-focused intentions. You can have commitment-focused intentions. Does that have too many T's and M's? I don't know. And you can have future commitment and outcome-focused intentions. And so thinking about different ways to frame them, that might just be useful to hold, in that my intention might be, my commitment to you is in the next 60 minutes to be as useful and empathetic as possible so that this time is really valuable.
The reason why we're coming together today is to create a future in which...
Lovely. So feel free to take those 3 categories and come up with your own prompts and phrases. It might be useful too. The same dynamic happens with reflective listening, right? If you're trying to say, hey, this is what I heard you say, to constantly say, so what I'm hearing you say is blank. You all of a sudden start to sound like a Dr. Phil or somebody. So to pull yourself out of that, just getting taking 60 seconds and jotting on a list of as many things that you could say other than that can just expand your brain. One of our mentors, Matt Church, always likes to say when you're thinking about 2 options, so it's like black and white or red and blue or any binary choice, right? To ask the question, what's the third option? What's the third way that I would say this? And I think there's so much wisdom in that idea of just creatively expanding outside of what you feel like you know right now or the decision you've pinned yourself in. And so just come up with that third option. What is Kim? I love this. Thank you so much. It's super lovely to have you joining from Jamaica. This is exactly why we exist on the planet, to help leaders and educators make connection and engagement super easy and meaningful, ideally, right? Hopefully this live stream is has a little bit of added depth and a different cadence and pace to the other videos and ideas that you'll find on the channel. Will, do you have one last lightning round question for me?
Yeah.
And then I think we can take Pavel's question.
It's escaping me, but you've been toying with connection and intention lately. What's a new piece that you're thinking about? And
Ooh. This is appreciating that because that question actually immediately sparked something new for me that I hadn't, or added to something that I've been thinking about, which is this idea of connection without comparison. And so I've thought about that, and I've been thinking about that concept, and I think there's really valuable. But I know that when I ask you a question, Will, I tend to hear your response through the lens of comparing it to my own story and my own world. And so the aha here is a really good intention could be potentially not to do something. And I know, or not to have something, right? So my intention right now is not to speak for the first 10 minutes and only listen with my full power of attention. Like, that would be a really cool intention. And so for me, I think my self-work lately is to connect without comparison. So Maui Mir, I don't need to necessarily say my intention is to connect without comparison, but at the beginning of a meeting with a client or the beginning of a workshop, I can say, I plan to connect with you all today without comparison. I want to just witness your story, understand your world as best as possible without comparing it and lining it up constantly to my world. That's fun. That one needs to get jotted down in the books after we close out here. Will, we talk about in these like 5 ingredients for engagement. So unofficial start, context hook, connection before content, designing content for contribution. The last one that we talk about is closing. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to lead us, even though it's kind of just the two of us and a synchronous, asynchronous live stream, if you'd be willing to lead us in some sort of a closing prompt or thought or reflection. Part of this live stream was inspired by the fact that we did just launch the journal. We only invited a handful of people that actually picked up the journal and offered to review it. And so, yeah, I would love to know just something to get us to reflect a little bit before just clicking into the next link, going to the next thing in our day.
There is some way that I want to leave us in action. You see, that was an intent statement without actually saying the word intent. So if I want to leave us in action, what would be an action that would inspire us to be our best selves? And so, Chad, based upon today's conversation and those who are listening in, based upon today's conversation, what is it? What's an action that you want to take that would inspire others to be their best selves?
For me, the action, I want to take more time to reflect to get a very, very, very specific response to this. But my fairly specific response is I want to continue to experiment, right? We in some way, like there's heaps to learn, I'm sure, but in some way we've mastered facilitating groups, small and large, on Zoom. This live stream like feels totally new. I feel like I've just like walked into a wedding that I wasn't invited to, that I didn't know anybody, and I'm like exploring this place and looking around, and I'm noticing it's so important for me. For the last, actually, LinkedIn keeps reminding me that this is 8-year anniversary of being full in with We and Me, which is crazy. And for 7 of those years, I've had the narrative that every single year I do something really big to stretch myself outside of my comfort zone, because I am oftentimes asking people to stretch and connect and do things in a way that aren't just business as usual for them. And so I need to be practicing that myself. And so that my narrative has been big experiments. And I wonder if the new chapter might be opening up in small experiments. And so literally yesterday, Will, you said, are we doing a live stream thing tomorrow? And I was like, I don't know. I got a lot of other stuff going on. The coordinator was like, yeah, let's just do it. And I'm really glad that we did, because I am stretched outside of my own comfort zone and exploring a new medium. And so I'm appreciating that. Leave us with your tiny act, and then I'm going to shut this party down.
I was just thinking that one of my staff years ago would do something every day that scared her.
Ooh.
That was her small experiment.
Which, rude interruption. I had the thought, I was in a store yesterday, Will, and I haven't shared this with you yet, but as we're launching this journal, there was a 1 line a day journal, and it had 5 years written out in it. And I was thinking about the Surgeon Generals, talking about the epidemic of loneliness, thinking about the place that we stand, even though we don't dip too deeply into that world of loneliness, focus more on a different aspect of connection, particularly in an educational or a work context. The thought appeared to me of, a connection a day keeps the doctor away. And so if we were to, do an experiment or do something that scared you every day, what would that look like if you had a 5-year journal and you just wrote 1 line of, this is the connection I made today? Whether that's a quick LinkedIn message, a text to your mom, an email to a colleague, or a video message offering an affirmation. Like 5 years of that's a lot of really valuable seeds. Now we do we probably make 5 years worth of connections happen in a single day. But I think having a structure like that would add a whole different level of intention. So, thoughts to ponder.
Good thought to ponder. I am left with really playing with what is it about compassion and action that's inspirational there for me. What is it that is underneath that? So I feel like there's something underneath there that I need to explore and pick apart and tease, because I think fundamentally the foundation of whatever that is speaking a truth that seems really relevant in these times.
I love it. Let's figure out how to high five each other in this little format, and then we'll click goodbye. Hey, it was super lovely hanging out with you live, Will. Thanks for watching. Cheers.
See you.
Have an awesome day.